welcome back. Today's book is What Happened to Goodbye by Sarah Dessen. I remember liking this one. However, the one problem that I had when I first read it is still a problem that I have now, and that is there is the subject of infidelity. The main character, whose name is Mclean, she travels around with her dad because he works in the restaurant business, and he is sent by this company called Eat Inc. to revive failing restaurants. What had happened is their parents got divorced because the mother had had an affair with the new head coach of the university's basketball team. This is a big deal because they're a big basketball family, and her parents named her Mclean after the legendary basketball coach at the same school. For then the next head coach to come in, have an affair with her mother and get her pregnant, it was a problem because it has been probably 2 years since the event happened. And I am sure in that 2-year period, her mother has apologized. However, Mclean is still dealing with that in this novel, and her mother never once apologizes. Her mother never once admits fault. And it's one thing to be like, you know what, I've fallen for someone else. This marriage isn't going to work out anymore. It's another to be like, so this other guy got me pregnant and I want to be with him instead. Like, that's a huge bomb to drop, and I don't think Dessen addressed it well enough, and I, in many ways, felt like she was condoning infidelity. Her mother just continues to badger her because Mclean has chosen, due to her mother's behavior, to separate herself from her mother. She does not want to see her mom. She does not want to live with her mom. She would rather be with her dad. She relates more to her father in this circumstance, in this predicament. Her mom gets so offended when Mclean gives her the cold shoulder, when Mclean won't respond to her calls, when Mclean won't come to see her. You need to slow your roll. Mclean has the right to make those decisions. She is technically a child, or legally a child, but she is old enough to have her own opinion regarding the situation, and I felt like the mother should have respected that. I also disliked the way that the mother, there were certain instances where Mclean didn't call her mom, didn't answer when her mom wanted her to answer, like things like that, and the mother would resort to getting lawyers involved to rearrange the custody agreement. Where is the understanding here, or where is the acknowledgement of wrongdoing? I really disliked how Dessen handled the whole situation. It bothered me to no end. I felt like Mclean had no voice in the situation, and understandably, by legal rights, she is a child, but she's not 8. She can make decisions for herself. Why should she be forced to spend time with a mother who has betrayed her trust? Why is she forced to spend time with a mother who has broken her family apart? Why is she forced to interact with a man who tore her family apart? I thought that could have added some real depth to this, because what Dessen ends up doing is essentially saying, because Mclean, what she does in every single city she goes to, she reinvents herself. Which, can I say, when I first read this novel, I thought, because I was an army brat, I was like, what a great idea. Why didn't I do that? It's hard, guys. Like, it is so hard to pretend to be somebody else, to change your personality, to mold yourself into a different persona. So it's still really cool, but I actually kind of have more respect for her now than I did when I was 17 or 20, because yeah, that's no easy feat. So this is kind of spoilerish, but not really. What Dessen ends up getting at is that her parents, or especially her dad, because obviously he had been the parental figure for these changes, never caught on to the fact that her changing her name in every city held a deeper meaning. So now it's Mclean's fault because she has unresolved issues. She absolutely does have unresolved issues, but I don't think we're really addressing where they're stemming from. We're scratching the surface, but we are not giving the whole issue of what her mother did the right amount of attention. So let's just get into the book. That was my number one issue, and I could not start this without airing my grievances. As you know, or may not, because you haven't read any of Dessen's books or seen any of my reviews, Dessen likes to connect all of her dots, and a lot of her characters and settings will reappear in her books, which I absolutely adore because it's like the comforts of home. I enjoy seeing characters and sort of seeing what's happened to them after their story ended, which, unrelated, but this popped into my head. When we read YA, especially YA that includes a romance, which is the majority of YA, are we supposed to assume that all these characters are just gonna live happily ever after? At the age of 17, they have found their one? It occurred to me, what if, because her first book came out in the early 2000s, and probably every year, every 2 years, she released a new one. So are we saying that in the 10-year span from her very first novel to this one, that all of her characters are still together? Because those 17-year-olds are now 27. It would be kind of interesting to see some characters no longer with their significant other from their own novel. Anyways, this book takes place in Lakeview. Mclean ends up going to Jackson. We meet her neighbor. I keep wanting to call him Dwayne Wade. It is not. His name is Dave Wade. We meet another girl named Riley. We also meet, obviously, her dad. We get a picture of Dave's parents. And then we also meet Opal, who is in charge of the restaurant that her dad has come to rescue. And then we also met this girl named Deb, who I don't remember connecting so much with her in previous reads, but poor Deb. Although, on another level, I thought she was a study in contradictions, but we'll get into that later, if I remember. Mclean, her middle name I think is Elizabeth, so she's been Beth, Eliza, something else recorded, and like for me in the end, I was like, none of those names fit her. She's a Mclean. When she comes to Lakeview, her plan is to become Liz. They have an equivalent of Facebook, which I know is obsolete these days, but in 2011, Facebook was the jam. She was gonna be Liz Sweet. She hadn't quite figured out who Liz Sweet was gonna be, but when she goes to the restaurant to meet her dad and she meets Opal, she introduces herself as Liz to Opal. And then when she goes to school, her teacher calls her Mclean, and then before she can correct him, he moves on. She had already met Dave the night or two before, because on either side of her house is party house with some collegiate kids and then Dave's family. She's like, I'm gonna go to that party. She does. She talks to some people. The cops come to bust it, and she is being chased by the cops when Dave pulls her into this cellar. And this is something I don't know. Sarah Dessen loves symbolism. So he pulls her into this cellar, and it's connected to what we learn is a hotel, which I think is so random. Mclean, for the entire novel, is obsessed with figuring out what kind of building this is. If they live in a residential area, why is there a random hotel behind them? I guess the idea is that in the end, there is a community project in which Opal, in order to save some parking lot space for the restaurant, agrees to put together like a town model. Mclean and her clan end up getting involved. We're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but Dave put some finishing touches on things, and he writes "stay" on the hotel in blacklight paint. She turns off the light and it says "stay," and this is a point where she is in the middle of staying or going. This is what the hotel is supposed to symbolize for this entire novel, but I've always been astounded at the fact that there's just this random hotel behind a residential area. It's been shuttered for who knows how long. But anyways, he pulls her down into the cellar. This is where they meet. One of the girls that she'd met at the party is his BFF, Riley. She also notices something's going on with Dave's parents. They are meeting with the principal, and so we get this idea that Dave might have something of a rocky past. He went from being this good boy, this super genius who went to Kiffney Brown, to someone who's not achieving his full potential at Jackson, and his behavior has gone downhill since he had started at Jackson. So now the question is, why is he at Jackson? What's the mystery behind Dave? The mystery is he got tired of not being able to be a real teenager. He convinced his parents to let him go to Jackson. He had gotten arrested for drunk driving. I think he had like a beer. This is just the end of the world for his parents, which I am not downplaying that. Like, do not drink and drive. But on some levels, it feels so simple that I'm like, you couldn't have come up with something a bit deeper when you are the queen of symbolism. You guys are gonna have to forgive me. I am so tired. My brain barely functions as it is, so thank you for bearing with me. We are going through school. She is greeted by Deb, and Deb introduces herself as the head of the welcoming committee at Jackson. We soon learn that Deb is the only part of this welcoming committee, and Deb is one of those involved people. She just likes to be involved in stuff, but nobody actually likes her. So at this point, I'm feeling terrible for Deb. She's trying so hard, and apparently she's had her own experience with moving around. What's so wrong with Deb except that sometimes you just don't like an overachiever? But throughout the novel, we see how multifaceted she is. She was a drummer for a heavy metal scream band. She is an expert on tattoos, and like there's so much about her that I was like, she's such a cool person. So what about her do people just not want to connect with? Because they obviously haven't given her a shot. Although the thing with Deb is that she keeps pulling out all these different versions of herself, like all these different ways that she is so dynamic, yet then she is really meek in certain situations. And I guess it could just stem from the fact that, you know, burn me once, shame on you, burn me twice, shame on me. Like, if all you are used to is people rejecting you, then I understand why you will pull back in group situations, or you will become a little bit insecure or self-conscious. But you get the impression that she's never really had friends. But it just doesn't ring with the kind of person she turns out to be. So I didn't really like how contradictory she was, but what can we do about that? She meets Deb, this other girl named Heather, who was one of Riley's best friends, and I thought Heather was something of a throwaway character. She was that blonde bimbo, but she wasn't a bimbo, but she was very one-dimensional. I cannot tell you what her point in the book was, because she had no backstory. She really added nothing. Let's head back to Luna Blue, where Opal and Gus, Mclean's dad, they just butt heads over everything. He is used to coming in and people doing what he says, and Opal fights for her rights. If you know what song that's from, leave it down below. But everything is looking pretty bad. It's a restaurant that had done well. The owners retired, went to Florida. Somebody else came into the picture, and the menu got convoluted. It was no longer pure to the original style of restaurant it was. Gus is just trying to mainstream things, and Opal, she disagrees. She thinks this is fine and this is fine, and why do we have to let go of our people and this and that and the other? In the end, spoiler, it turns out that the restaurant isn't gonna make it as it is. What then happens is Opal, who had never planned, she had worked at Luna Blue as a high schooler, as a teenager, a little bit in college. Her goal was never to come back and work in a restaurant, but circumstances led to her taking over as the manager. When the restaurant is going to be sold, she ends up buying it out along with the original owners, who are finding retirement a little boring. Gus is, again, we're getting into some spoilers here. Gus is offered a position in Hawaii, which is when everything goes to pot with Mclean. She has to decide what she's gonna do. Is she gonna go to Hawaii? Because she has found, and I like this idea that she's trying to be other people to escape who she is. Then she arrives at this town where she has no choice but to be who she is and to form actual connections. She's torn because she wants to stay in Lakeview, but she had an incident with her mother, so she does not want to go back to live with her mother. Does she really want to go to Hawaii? We find out that he and Opal start to date. I don't remember this being so whitewashed and unnecessary, but Opal's arch nemesis is an old high school frenemy. She and this girl, I can't remember her name, but is now a councilwoman, are always trying to outdo each other. The councilwoman somehow starts getting Gus to date her. Mclean, there are signs for Mclean, and she knows that it's time to pull up stakes and go. And she wasn't seeing those signs, even though he was dating this woman. But then all of a sudden she walks in and she finds her dad and Opal doing some hanky-panky on their couch. She's like, where did this come from? But he decides, yeah, I'm going to go to Hawaii for this stint, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to help out Luna Blue. Mclean ends up staying in Lakeview, and she's going to live with Opal. Of course, this all relates back to some family drama that had happened. And what had happened was, per the custody agreement, she was gonna go with her mother and her stepfather and her little half-siblings to Colby. She gets there, and she's just like, because this whole book, she's like, who is my mother? She used to be Katie Sweet, and now she's Catherine, whatever his name is. I can't remember her stepfather's last name. She gets to this mansion on Colby, and she's like, I don't belong here. Heidi, who is also from Along for the Ride, she shows up because Mclean didn't have a bathing suit, which is another story. Her mom had called Heidi up because Heidi owns a boutique, and Heidi's like, oh, hey, here are some things for you. I need to go talk to your mom. She's like, yeah, just go inside. She overhears them having a conversation, which makes her upset because it sounds like her mom is talking about regretting having her with her, when in actuality it was, there's a party that they're throwing, and her mother regrets having committed to this party when her husband Peter is not going to be there. Mclean had discovered that her mother had stowed her old car in this garage, as well as a whole lot of other stuff that Mclean had left behind. She throws it all into the car, and then she drives out to this old motel that she and her mother used to stay at when they were poor. And while she's there, she unearths all the other girls that she had become. She has the big revelation, and she's super upset, so she calls Dave, who's already in trouble for other stuff. Dave never shows up, but her parents do. They come to terms with things, and she is on good terms with her mother, and so she is initially slated to come live with her mother and stepfather, when it just comes to be that she will be miserable. Like, neither mother or father are the best option, which is why she ends up staying in Lakeview with Opal. All that out of the way, let's go back to the beginning. One of the things that is happening is that Opal has committed to this miniature city project. Her workforce is supposed to be a bunch of delinquents. She was naive enough or ignorant enough not to know to sign the papers right away, because the delinquents then forge her signature for all their other remaining shifts, and no one else shows up, although Dave ends up showing up, and this is how we learn that he is on probation because he had a drunk driving incident. The deadline keeps getting pushed up and up and up. On this note, like, the councilwoman, I think her name is Lauren, I don't remember, it doesn't matter. I felt like she was so stereotypical, where I would have liked a little bit more nuance from Dessen, because she could do that. It's very obvious from the get-go that the woman lied to Opal about the first deadline. And then, because the restaurant is being sold, then we have a new deadline. And this woman is just so catty and juvenile regarding Opal, and making Opal feel like a terrible person. Like, she's someone who's not worthwhile. I'm like, why is Opal so threatening to you? We never know. We just know that they've always been rivals. I needed more backstory for this woman. And I hate her on principle, but like, I really need something to dig my teeth into. This is when Riley, Mclean, Heather, a guy named Ellis, who is Dave's best friend, and then Dave all start doing the work. We also get to see this guy named Jason, who was in Along for the Ride. He was the prom date that was a terrible prom date and canceled on her twice. It was really cool to see what had happened to him, which in the earlier novel, he was a super genius. He was like Dave, and he was really stuck up about it. And he thought he was so much better than everybody else, which is why he kept canceling on all dates. Here, he has quit Harvard, and he now works as a cook at Luna Blue. This whole novel, you just keep getting the sense that there's more to him. He's just a really great grounding character, so I enjoyed seeing his character arc where he essentially realized the error of his ways. He was not a good dude. There is a moment where Mclean takes Dave with her to a basketball game because her mother just will not let up. And so Mclean agrees to go, and at the last minute she is like, hey Dave, do you want to come with me? And Dave, this is, as I said, a big time basketball team. And he's like, you know, like, you just don't understand. Like, there's no way to get tickets right now. There's no way to get tickets last minute. She's like, oh, don't worry. And then they get to the game, and he starts to apologize to her mother, and Mclean's like, he doesn't think we'll be able to get him in. This was a really good humanizing moment for her mom, whether Dessen meant it to be or not, where it's kind of like, are you serious? Let's see what we can do. And then obviously they're courtside. I liked that moment. One, I thought it was very funny. And two, I liked to see Mclean and her mother interacting because we needed that. There's this whole thing about her mother, how she grew up wealthy and almost debutante-ish. She meets Gus, who is the exact opposite. She goes from being Catherine to becoming Katie, who is basically a blue-collar worker trying to help her husband keep their restaurant afloat. And then it's like she had to shed that skin to be with Peter. And in a sense, maybe that's not who she wanted to be anyways, and she sacrificed to do that. Like, that's something that she didn't actually want to do, but then she felt like she had to do that to be with Gus. I thought that was really interesting. It was an interesting concept of, in the end, we have this, the wrong conception of who her mother is. Mclean has misjudged her mother, but I felt like there was so much going on. We did not fully realize the potential of some of these other plot points that I think teenagers can benefit from, because I'm sure a lot of teenagers are from broken homes and they've experienced situations similar to this, and they have trust issues and parent issues. Couldn't we have looked at that more? There's so much happening. And then we have the romance between Mclean and Dave, which I thought was really sweet. I really enjoyed how upfront Dave was about things, because Riley has been saying, hey, Dave likes you, Dave likes you, Dave likes you. And then there comes a point where he's like, I'm just going to tell you how I feel, and this is what I want going forward. So I liked how he's not that typical nerdy dude who isn't brave enough to tell the girl he likes or to go after the girl he likes. That is What Happened to Goodbye. I thought it was a really great novel for teenagers. It addresses all of those adolescent insecurities, and I think you could learn from it. Anyways, there you go, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.